Hello YouTube, this is Bruno. I promised you a tutorial for this copper aging machine here. Now the thing is, in order to prevent a video that is already pretty long from being a lot longer, I will focus on the non-standard redstone. For example, here we have an item filter and I will just link a tutorial for these items filters, but don't describe them here in detail. Now the other thing is that if I would build this farm 5 times, I would probably end up with 5 different farms. Because I'm not a guy who builds a farm block for block, always in the same way. Of course, I will totally create a farm in Creative and then do a delete Manica file and build it block for block in Survival. And if I had to pick out one mod that is essential for technical Minecraft, it would be delete Manica. I can't really recommend it enough. If you don't use it, please check it out. It will save you hours and hours of bug fixing for more complicated farms. However, this farm has a lot of degrees of freedom, so my primary focus here is to explain how the things work together and to explain the redstone behind it and the decision process. So you will be able to build the farm yourself, but also adapt it to your needs, make it smaller or larger, add more bends here. I will not cover the topic of chunk loading, because I believe this is worth a separate video. To get the oxidized copper that we need for the farm, I assume you have a good source of copper. We start by laying out the blocks in a 5x5 lattice, just to get a stack or so. And you will need to be in the vicinity for about 90 minutes. After that, most of the blocks will have oxidized. So let's simulate this. So after that, you should have a stack of oxidized copper, give or take a bit. Break all that copper and use a stone cutter to convert the copper to oxidized cut copper slabs. And this will give you 8 stacks, or a bit more depending how much copper you had, of oxidized cut copper slabs. And now lay them out in rows, just like so, and alternate with fresh copper blocks. And do this with about, let's say, 9 stacks of fresh copper. So this should look something like this. And the oxidized cut copper slabs are just as efficient as oxidized copper blocks. But of course you can get 8 cut copper slabs out of 1 oxidized copper block, so they are much more efficient. So we used essentially 1 stack of oxidized copper to get 8 stacks of cut copper slabs. And this should happen in the vicinity of the copper aging machine that you're about to build. So this should be close enough that all of this area is random ticked within 8 chunks. So we go on building the copper aging machine. After about 6 hours, pretty much all of your copper will be oxidized. And now we just break the whole thing and collect the oxidized copper and convert it once again to oxidized cut copper slabs. This will give us about 2 shulkers full, which will be enough to seed our farm. Let's start with the main part of the machine. We will build a farm in a way that you can have all of the flying machines and the TNT duper chunk loaded by one chunk loader. For this, we keep the copper that is laid out in a 3x3 chunk area. And check out the area that will be broken by the TNT duper. There we leave 2 blocks to the side of the chunks, because the minecart and the TNT has to be in the 3x3 chunk loaded area that processes entities. The rest of the machine can extend 1 more chunk to the outside. Now we're not too concerned about the items, because for the machine to run, the player has to be in the vicinity to random tick the area. So the only thing that we want to protect using a chunk loader is the flying machines, because they might break if we leave the area. Let's say the player will be here in the minecart and we will place the copper here. Then we need to go out 13 blocks to the push limit, or 1 over the push limit, including this one. Now we will create an outline of the platforms. From the original 13 blocks we can go up or down, add 12 blocks to get to the 13 blocks again, and then we can go in right angles, adding more platforms. We just need 1 platform at the end without another platform under or over it, where we will break the blocks using the TNT duper. This outline here utilizes 9 platforms and keeps everything within 3 chunks. With 12 blocks in every platform, each column contains 108 blocks. And now we can choose the width of the farm depending on how many blocks we want to age at once. Here we go for 44 blocks, as this keeps the width to 3 chunks as well, with 2 blocks on the outside on each side. This means we can age 74 stacks of copper blocks at once, or just short of 3 shulker boxes. Of course you can scale the width up or down, depending if you want to age more or less copper blocks, but if you scale it up you will have to add another chunk loader. Okay, so now we know where the platforms will be, and let's start constructing the flying machines. Let's start with the flying machine containing the player, and we will need 2 immovable blocks here Whenever I use obsidian, you could also use furnaces or something. And we have to go a bit to the outside for reasons that will become apparent in a moment. We will construct a platform that starts here at the obsidian and goes 5 blocks back. And the player will sit in the minecart in the middle of it, like so. And we will have walls on the outside containing the minecarts. And we will have pistons pushing and observers going into the slime blocks here, so that the pistons will be pushed if we move this platform. And of course we need one obsidian to stop the flying machine. And now we need an engine pushing this. So we will go 2 blocks back and place a sticky piston here, as not to get stuck. On our water channel that we'll construct in a moment, we go to the inside and 1 block down, and we have our 1 piston here, another piston facing the other way, 2 slime blocks, and we will have 1 observer powering these 2 pistons and another observer powering this piston. So this is really the easiest flying machine engine that you can do. And we will need an obsidian to stop it. All we need to do to activate this will be to flap a trapdoor that goes here. So I put an obsidian in the path to stop the whole thing. And now you can see what happens. The pistons on both sides of the player will push the copper. And then, of course, the flying machine will get stuck. And we need to send it back. And all we have to do there is flap a trapdoor here. So now we know how to construct a return station. And the reason for the obsidian here is that we kind of rely to have pistons push on both sides. If the player would start here, then we wouldn't have this piston pushing the blocks out of the way. So we would have like a 2 wide strip here on the outside that would move only 1 block if we go back and forth, while all the others are moved 2 blocks. So this is just to keep it symmetric. We have to mirror this on the other side. And we want the player to end up in this position. So here we have a piston trying to push this over. So our flying machine with the player would be here. So this would be the player. Put an obsidian block here. And then we can just move the flying machine over and construct a return station. Flap the trapdoor. Okay, that's cool. And now we will just use 2 observers. They will register if this observer arrives. Run them into an obsidian block. In this case, we strictly don't need an obsidian block, but we'll use an unmovable block anyway. And then we need a bit of delay, a total of 1 second, because we have to wait until all these pistons that were moved are no longer extended. And we can do this by using 2 repeaters here, set to full delay. And here we have another 0.2 seconds from the observers. And then 1 second after this flying machine arrives, we would just flap this trapdoor here. Start it again, and you'll see the flying machine return on its own. And now we need the flying machines for all the other platform direction changes. All of the other flying machines are much simpler and follow the same pattern. So here we need a piston pushing up. So this piston would have to sit here, but it will fire only after it's pushed once. So we move it more to the outside, like so. And then we construct a flying machine wherever it fits. For example, in this case, we just need to avoid that it's getting stuck on the copper. So we could do 1 piston going out here, another piston going in here, 2 slime, and have 1 observer move both of these pistons, and another observer move this piston, and 1 obsidian to block the flying machine, and we would again use a trapdoor to start it. But let's construct the return station first. So we want this observer ending up just outside of this block. So our observer would sit here. This is also the one that we need to activate for the return. So we put again 2 observers here, use 1 obsidian, 1 piece of redstone dust that is activated by the observers, 2 repeaters on full delay, and then our trapdoor here. So this is the return station. And now all we need to do to activate this flying machine is flap a trapdoor here. Of course, there are different layouts how you can handle this. Essentially, it's up to you. But it's always the same principle. So for example, here we need one piston pushing to the right. So we need a piston here. And then we can construct our flying machine around it. And again, one observer activating these. And this will always be the returning piston. And one more observer here. And just repeat this for all of the other platforms that you want to do. We'll check out how we can activate them in a moment. And to activate this first flying machine that pushes the player, we'll just use a hopper clock or an etho clock. I'll link a tutorial for that, but most of you will know how to construct this. And on one side we have a redstone torch that activates our trapdoor here. And for now we have a stack of items which will make the clock just fast enough so that the flying machines is started shortly after it arrives back here. Of course, we have to chain all these other flying machines here. And we need a bit more delay for the first flying machine. It essentially goes 4 blocks further than the other flying machines. So we need a bit more delay between these two than for the others. And for that, we'll just use another etho clock. But if we replace one sticky piston with a normal piston, this becomes a delay circuit. So right now we have a redstone torch here, giving an output because this hopper is empty. But we have a pulse shortener here. If we activate this button here, then after about 3 seconds, this pulse shortener will be activated. And first we have a redstone line to this flying machine. This is started. Here I have shown you a few ways how you can chain the other flying machines. And you can choose whatever you prefer. So one way that works very well upwards is to use scaffolding. We have a trapdoor, and you may notice that this gives a signal that is read by the observer on top because the distance to the base changes, and we can also tweak this around for up to 6 blocks. We can change the shape of the scaffolding. We have a delay of 1 game tick or 1/20th of a second for each scaffolding block. So here we have 17 scaffolding blocks, so we already have a delay of 0.85 seconds, which is actually a bit more than we need. But the drawback of scaffolding is that the trapdoor needs at least 0.2 seconds to register. So if we have just one redstone tick, we wouldn't read anything up there. This would mean that this observer here is activated twice, and this means we need to put in another repeater. Otherwise our flying machine will end up in this state, because this trapdoor will flap twice. So on balance, we have maybe a bit more delay than we want between these flying machines. So the other methods I will show you are a bit better because we can tweak the delay in a better way. Of course, you could also just use a redstone line, and these can go basically in any direction. It's a bit easier to do it upwards and in a horizontal way. And here we need a delay of 0.6 seconds. Once this trapdoor gets the signal, we have 2 repeaters set to a total of 6 ticks delay, and this will activate the next trapdoor. And another way, of course, is to use a sticky piston pushing slime. So this redstone block will activate this repeater. The sticky piston has a delay of 0.2 seconds, so to get to 0.6 we need to add 4 redstone ticks more. And this is just what this repeater here gives. And of course, you just chain all of the other flying machines in whatever way is most convenient for you. Just make sure that each of them activates about 0.6 seconds after the previous one. And it's true that redstone dust causes lag, but only if it changes the state. All of these flying machines are activated only once per minute, give or take a bit, so I'm really not too concerned about the lag here. Of course you could use rails and observers and stuff, but we want to keep it as easy as possible. So after wiring all of these flying machines, all we need to do is our master clock to fire, which will update this piston here and will send all of the flying machines on their way. And here's the water stream that will supply our player with items. The first thing that you observe is that we have top slabs here, and these are very important. First, the player sits in a minecart like this, and the player places copper against the other copper or against some layer that we have here below. Now, if this was, for example, glass, which was a full block, which doesn't suffocate the player, but then if we try to place copper, our head is still in the glass. So we see this in our Weiler ad at the top center of the screen. Now if I just place a block, apparently nothing happens, but FreeCam shows that I actually placed the block in a water stream. So this can't happen. So we need top slabs here, everywhere where the player wants to place items. But of course we need to align the items, because if we had top slabs here, they would fall out. We need the items really along this border here, so we have to align them at this side. And that's why we use a water stream like this. So if we throw in items like here, they will be first grouped to stack. This is just efficiency. And then they will be aligned to the side here. And they end here. And of course we will loop them back once we have built our supply for copper here. So this is future Bruno, and after explaining why the head of the player can never be inside of a glass block, because the player would plant the copper here, of course I constructed a system where the player's head is in a glass block. So what we need to do is to move all of this that I built after that 2 blocks to the right from my perspective. Let's fix this, and I apologize that it's wrong for the next few minutes in the video. We put in the items just using a dropper. Let's build a little cage, like so, and then the easiest clock of them all. So we have an observer on compare going out into a block, a redstone dust, another block here, a repeater, and probably you have seen this with redstone replaced here, but redstone is more laggy than full blocks, and in this case we can replace the redstone with blocks and everything works as the same. And it's important that this here is on subtract mode, because if our dropper happens to be completely full, this clock will still work. We will just bring some copper in here, and again the copper will be grouped to stacks and will be aligned nicely to the side where we want the items. So this is future Bruno. Here we have our etho clock that controls our flying machines, but this is blocked by this lever here, and this lever will also block the clock that outputs the item in the water stream. So by just flicking this lever, we will start the item supply and start all of the flying machines. So let's bring the items to the dropper. So we start with a hopper, and let's build this just a bit out of the way. So we have 3 possible inputs for fresh copper, exposed copper, and weathered copper. We need to enable these inputs separately. So let's use another set of hoppers here. And what we'll do is to have redstone torches, turn each of them on and off. And on top we have a chest silo containing the fresh, the exposed and the weathered copper. If you want to use the continuous operation that I described in my last video, then you'll need a bit larger capacity. If you just want to fill the machine and let it age all at once, then you will need maybe a double chest or 2 for each type. Now what's the principle? So let's say this silo contains the fresh copper, then this redstone torch should be turned off at the start. And we will use comparators, and we will have droppers facing this way. And this dropper is facing to the front, and then we will just loop an item back, and we put 1 item in. And now this chest silo is enabled. And if we want to move the items, of course we have to do it in the correct order. And we can't use a redstone line, because if we use a redstone line, depending on the redstone update order, we might move the item 2 or even 3 blocks. So for example, if this one was triggered first and then this one and then this one, then the item would move all the way to the hopper. But what we can do is basically use observers. So we use an observer powering this dropper, and then another one powering this, and another one powering that. This way we power them in the right order. First this dropper, then this dropper, then this dropper, using quasi-connectivity. So we want to trigger this observer chain whenever our dropper that puts the copper in the water stream runs dry. Okay, now what can happen is, if the items just come in, that we get a flashing reading here, because this dropper contains an item for a short time that is outputted immediately. So we kind of need to stabilize this. So we want to trigger the switch over if we don't have an item for a couple of seconds. So what we can do is just put in a pulse extender. We need a 2-tick repeater to initialize that, and 2 pieces of redstone dust, another piece of redstone dust here. And we have a repeater going this way and another repeater going into a solid block, like so. And now, even if this dropper is flashing, we have a solid pulse here. But this one will run out as soon as the dropper is empty, about 2.5 seconds later. When this happens, we need to give this observer an update, but not if we change the state again, if we get an item in. And we can do this using a sticky piston and a bit of slime. And we need to send a signal if the piston is deactivated. That means we could use an observer giving us a signal here. And we will use a node block here, because a node block is not quasi-powered. So the node block will not be activated if I push the observer up, because we get a redstone signal here over the observer. Only if it's depowered, the node block gets a signal and we change the state here. So again, we are in the first chest tower. Piston moves up, nothing happens. Piston goes down and we switch over. So we put in a few items. Now let's first change it over to the first chest tower. So here we will have the fresh copper. And let's put in here a bit of weathered copper. And here a bit of exposed copper. And here a bit of fresh copper. And just verify that happens what we want to happen. As soon as the dropper is empty, the system switches over. And we have our supply of items. And basically all that we will need to do is to put an item filter on top for the items that come in both from here that are not picked up by the player and from the items that will be broken by the TNT duper. And here I have added an item filter and a water stream for the copper. This is basically the usual impulse SV item sorter, except that we can use one block of the filter item so it can pick up 63 items at a time. And here we have an overflow, and the overflow goes first in this chest. But if this chest should happen to be full, it will go into the last column here, so items won't despawn. Typically, if you set up the farm right, this chest should contain only a few items, perhaps. And I trust you know how to build an item filter, but in any case, if you don't know how to build this particular variant, I linked the tutorial in the description of this video. This tutorial also contains how to set up these 2 double-speed shulker box loaders. And one of them is for the oxidized copper. Sometimes you can get in items a bit faster than hopper speed, so I just added 2 filters to be sure that we pick up all of them, even though they would just land here in the overflow. And I also added 2 filters for cobble. All the coppers age, you don't have any fresh copper, then you can just put in cobble, let the TNT tuber break the oxidized copper. To make sure that the cobble is not lost, I added another shulker box loader for the cobble. And the shulker boxes will appear in this output chest here. So I finished the water streams. So just have 8 blocks where the water flows and then followed by 1 sign and a block of packed ice. And here we loop the items around using a bubble elevator. So these are all water sources. This is soul sand. So any items that are not picked up by the player will go into the bubble elevator, be transported back to the sorting system, and be picked up here. Now we have everything in place to put in the copper. Check out that all the flying machines are working, maybe fix a few issues. It's a good idea to put a few lighting blocks in there, because all of these copper platforms are of course spawnable and not lit, and you don't want skeletons or creepers to spawn next to the player. I of course did make a mistake, because I put in 1 flying machine wrong. But as I said in my last video, this farm is really hard to break. If you make a mistake, it's rather easy to fix it. So here I had just to rebuild the 1 flying machine in the correct place, and everything worked. So one way to handle the lighting is to put a few torches here on the water channel and just place very few torches here on the first platform, because you can break them later. Mobs might spawn here as well. It's a good idea to add a few torches as well, probably at the time when you generate the platform, before you generate the upper platforms, because otherwise you might have to fight up a few mobs once you place the oxidized copper. And all of these platforms are pretty safe as long as you're in daytime. And now, if all the copper that you laid out to oxidize at the start is already oxidized, would be a good time to place in the oxidized cut copper slabs, which also has the advantage of making the platforms unspawnable. If you're lacking a bit of oxidized copper, you can also do something like this. Just lay out the slabs in every second row. The first batch of copper will oxidize significantly slower, but after that you can just add the missing slabs and everything will be fine. So we'll get to the last platform in a moment, but all the other platforms should be covered either on one side for the vertical ones or on top, because it's easier to do for the horizontal ones, with oxidized cut copper slabs. Just make sure that they don't interfere with the flying machines. For example, here we left out this row. And now all that's left is to do the water collection in the TNT duper. And the TNT duper will fly right over this line of blocks and will be 83 blocks up. If this is height 88, then the TNT duper would sit at height 171. But first let's do the obsidian to protect the copper against destruction. We go in 4 rows, like so. So we leave 4 rows exposed and cover, well, probably it's enough to do 2 rows with obsidian. And now let's do the water collection. And we leave 2 blocks air on either side, so the broken copper can drift a bit to the left or to the right and still land in a water stream. And so this would be the border. And of course you don't have to use glass, so you can use any blocks as long as you make them spawn proof. And now we go out 8 blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we have a 2 block drop. And then we have our bottom. So just copy this here, the temporary blocks. And this until you're 2 blocks away from this edge here. Add water sources on one side. So this is our basic shape. The water will stop here at the edge because we went 8 blocks. Here at this end we put in a water source. And then we always use the same progression. We use 1 ice block. We use a sign over the ice block and we use a sign 1 block back. And put a water source here. And now we need to loop the item into this water stream. Use 1 ice block here and 1 sign. And then build a water channel as usual. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with the flying machines. So that's the finished construct. All of the items are stopped here by this glass block and the water is stopped by a sign, so they fall down into this water stream. So if we throw anything in here, it will end up here. So it's probably a good idea to stack up these items to make it easier for the filters. So we could use a slab, but in this case it's really convenient to use a cobweb. And now just go back to the top and fill this area here with oxidized cut copper slabs. And all that's left to do is the TNT duper on top. To finish this build, we go to the side where we want the control center of the TNT duper. We go to the outermost copper block and build up exactly 81 blocks of scaffolding. So we were at height 88 and now we are at height 170. X marks the spot, and this is where we want the TNT to end up. And this is a fairly simple TNT duper. Now to assemble it, we need 3 blocks of slime. Then we go up 1 block. Then we add a little triangle, like so. And we put a detector rail in, and also a minecart, and some type of wall, which will keep the minecart in place, even if we push the TNT duper. We need a dead coral fan of any type, and you put it here in the middle of these 3 initial blocks. And now we need a TNT, but if we put it here, it would ignite immediately. So we put it under the wall. And we'll move the TNT duper in this direction, and after moving it once, the TNT will be set in place for the duper. And we also need one obsidian block to stop the TNT duper here. And now we need the flying machine to push this TNT duper. And we put the flying machine here in the back. We need to leave at least 1 block space, better 2, for reasons that you'll see in a moment. And we go up 3 more blocks. We need to place 1 observer powering this block somewhere on any side, basically. And now we construct something that looks very much like a normal flying machine. But now we will build a manual motor. We use non-stick blocks. So you could use pumpkins, for example, or glazed terracotta. We put redstone on it, and we do this on both sides. Extend the non-stick blocks just a bit further. I think 3 blocks will be nice. And now power the side that powers the backward piston. And this will be the final position of our flying machine. And we need 2 obsidian blocks to stop the 2 sides separately. Like so. And now you might want to secure the flying machine for a moment with another obsidian here, just to make sure it doesn't get away from you. And now we build up a clock, and the clock will power both sides. And I will use a couple of lighting blocks because we don't want any mobs to spawn here. And now we use repeaters to strongly power these blocks. And we use a target block that can be in any position. Have it pushed by a sticky piston like so. And now what we can do is we have a redstone signal here, and wherever the target block is, it will connect to the redstone signal. And now we need a clock with just the right timings. And the right timings in this case is a clock that is off for 8 game ticks or 4 redstone ticks, and on, well, for however long we want it to be, to get enough delay between the TNT blasts. So we will use 1 repeater at maximum delay going into a redstone torch, and then an observer facing this way. And here we will use a clock that has a delay of 1.4 seconds or 14 redstone ticks. And we do this by putting 2 pieces of redstone dust here, 2 repeaters on full delay, a solid block, redstone torch, another repeater on full delay, and 1 repeater on 1 tick delay. So this is the right timing, and we'll put in a lever just to be able to stop it. And now we build up here our pumpkin line to be long enough to cover all of our platform. So make this long enough. We remember that here we want the final TNT position. Repeat this on the other side. Cover the whole thing in redstone. And now we need to extend the redstone signal. So here you can see here, this is the last position. So what we'll do is we'll take the block that is the last block that gets a signal. We want to power this using a repeater. And now we need a solid block. Take our redstone signal here. So this block still has a signal. Then we put another repeater here, and we remove the redstone signal here. And we can extend the line like so. And of course we don't have a loop. We have extended our signal with a bit of delay, but this is not critical. In survival, this is just a bit iffy, because we have to go down somehow. But for this I just use a bit of water so that we can place 1 block below, pick up the water again, and now we can build the structure that we need. Yeah, repeat this until the signal reaches the end. And now if we change the side where we have the redstone signal, we see that the flying machine is moving. And I push the TNT duper to the other side to show you the return in a moment. So what happens, I've frozen the game. This is pretty much a flying machine, which is usually a 12 game tick engine. It would move 1 block every 0.6 seconds. But what happens here is that we power this piston on this side, so this is extended all the time. So this piston can't pull the other side. And what happens if we depower this side is that it pulls the side, like so. Now this observer fires and activates this piston, like so. It pushes the side, and now usually this observer fires, but at the time when this observer fires, and usually it would pull the other side further, the redstone signal is already on, keeping the piston closer to us extended, and the machine can't move any further until the redstone signal on the pumpkin line is off. It looks a bit weird in operation because this piston is firing once more but can't pull. This even works here, where we have an additional 4 game tick delay. And now we need to stop it in a way so that we can pull the flying machine on the return side. And for that, I've put a stopper block here, so the TNT is exactly at the end of our pumpkin line. And I've put 2 stopper blocks, one here and one extra obsidian, with another slime block here. So this flying machine is stopped in a position that it can never pull this side any further. So we will always have the gap. Now the return is only guaranteed if you move the flying machine all the way to the back. And this is perhaps the one part with the copper aging machine where I'm not quite satisfied. This could be a bit more resistant, let's say, but once you've set it up correctly, it's all good. So let's change the direction. And I lost the TNT there for a moment. If you lose the TNT, which can happen if you manually move the machine, all you need to do is put the TNT back under the wall here, but of course once the machine has stopped. So it goes back all to the side. We use the same trick. We stop these sides 3 blocks apart. And I also removed all of the glass blocks here that would have stuck to the slime here. And now you're all set. All you need to do is to reverse the direction after precisely the time that the machine needs to go to the other side. Or well, a couple of seconds more. I left the note block in that we are able to reverse the direction manually if you want to by clicking the note block. And now we just put in an etho clock that reverses the direction of the flying machine after it has reached the end here. And I suggest to wait until the flying machine is in one of the terminal positions on either side. And then we turn off the clock here, so it won't move. So here we have our etho clock, and we will use a lever that allows us to turn it off on both sides. So our machine was 44 blocks wide, and we'll add 2 blocks for the additional delay. So we're on the safe side. We have 46 blocks that the machine needs to go. 46 blocks at 1.4 seconds per block is about 160 items, or maybe a couple more to be on the safe side. So after all of the items are on one side, we can verify if we did it correctly. Activate the clock and activate this etho clock. And once you're done, you should observe the flying machine going back and forth with the TNT duper. You can monitor that you have put in the correct number of items. So basically when the flying machine arrives here, yeah, that's looking good. And now we reverse direction and it goes the other way. Okay, how can we turn on and turn off the farm with using one lever? At the bottom we only have one lever. This clock can keep running, that's not a big issue. And one way to stop the farm, also where the flying machine is in this position here, would be to put a redstone block here, because this will keep this piston extended. The sticky piston here. Once again, power this using an observer facing into the sticky piston, and then use a scaffolding tower. So this is the usual way to do this. This is just under the observer. And whenever we flip the trapdoor down here, we will change the state. Now we would need some signal coming from this lever here. So I'll be the first to admit that this is start to look a bit ugly. And maybe I would just stick to 2 different switches or put in wireless redstone or something. But let's do it quick and dirty here. And basically extend this using a repeater or 2. So that it reaches all the way to the trapdoor. It will take the signal almost 10 seconds to get up the scaffolding tower, because this is close to 200 blocks. So this should be the state that we need. We have the clock turned off here, and we have turned off the clock at the bottom. So if we flick this lever, our farm will start to work. All of the flying machines here will go, and after a while the TNT duper on top. And you can turn it off, and all of the flying machines will return to the neutral position, and then you can leave the area without breaking anything. So this video was a bit different from the videos I usually make. Let me know in the comments if you liked it or not, and if you want to see more tutorials like that. Please check the description. Once the video is uploaded, I can't change it anymore. If I have corrections or additions, then I can only note it in the description of the videos or in a pinned comment. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you want to see more tutorials like this, and see you next time. Bye bye!